And to discuss these reforms further, we are joined by Mark Dreyer, the founder of China Sports Insider, and Rowan Simons, the chairman of China Club Football. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Plenty to discuss, but let's begin at the top. And why is this reform plan coming out? Mark, I will begin with you.
Well, first and foremost, I mean, China, as everyone knows here, is a football-mad country. The support is clear. Take Beijing Guoan, for example, in the Chinese Super League. If they were playing in the English Premier League, they'd be the 8th best-supported club. So the passion is there from the fans, but there's just been chronic underachievement for years and years. You mentioned it in the introduction. The men's are way down, but the women's team as well have been on a downward slope as well over the last 10 or 15 years.
Rowan?
Well, I mean, the timing's very interesting. Obviously, there are some political angles involved here. It's a very populist move. But at the same time, it has to be said that pretty much all of what's in this reform package needs to be done. Some simple truths, some hard truths have been revealed about Chinese football. So overall, from someone who's very deeply involved in the game, what you're looking at is really quite historic. I think a very historic break between the CFA and the government and the Ministry of Sports. This is something which overturns a Soviet Union system that's been in place in China for over 60 years. So really quite a remarkable development. And I think all the way through the line, the 50 clauses in this new plan talk very sensibly about a lot of the things that have affected Chinese football and what the game needs to do to improve.
Okay, so we're talking about that. What are the major challenges facing the CFA in implementing this?
Yeah. Well, all the challenges still remain. So the President has laid out a vision for what we should do, but actually to implement that is extremely hard. So we still have to deal with the lack of pitches, with the lack of coaching in schools. These are all very serious issues. But now, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Land, other authorities at every level across China have to address the issues. Before, they've failed to address those issues. So once again, I think it's a very historic move that portends very well for Chinese football, but the devil is in the detail and in the implementation.
Mark?
Well, the biggest thing for me is, as you both have mentioned, this separation between the CFA and the state and how that's actually going to play out in practice. Because in the past we've had a lot of people in government positions sometimes just acting in very short-term decisions to get promotion, to get to the next stage, perhaps out of the game entirely. That doesn't benefit the game at all. Now what we're hoping to see is to have professionals in place for a long period of time, and then they can really implement that long-term change that's needed.
Now, so simply put, will they work? Mark?
Well, it's you know, we all hope so. We all sitting here absolutely hope that that will be the case. But it's going to be very, very difficult. We talked, as I said, the separation between the CFA. They're still overseen by the State Council, by China's cabinet. So that, for me, is the big issue there.
Rowan? You?
Well, you know, the reforms are very, very hard to do. This is an issue that's been troubling China for 30 years plus, so no easy solutions. I think, you know, if anything, it just gives people a feeling that football has an opportunity to become the people's game, which it never has in China. Certainly within the plan there are some very clear indications that the CFA must be opened up to stakeholders within the game. So certainly organisations like our own Club Football will be looking to play a more active role within the association. Mark mentioned, which is very, very true, a long-term view is something we've never heard of before. It's always been 3 years, 4 years during the rule of one particular leader. This, at 10 years or 8 years even, is a long-term plan by China standards. So you know, all the questions still remain, but we have a real chance now to make these reforms. If this chance is missed, it will be another generation before China has another chance, so we have to grab it.
Now, it's interesting you mentioned 8-10 years. President Xi Jinping has expressed his love of football. How will that affect these reforms going forward?
Yeah, it's massive. You know, in my book Bamboo Goalposts, I researched the importance of Chinese leaders' support for football. The late Deng Xiaoping was a huge football fan and very much used it in his own international affairs and domestic affairs. Xi Jinping is the biggest football fan to lead China since Deng Xiaoping. It has a huge impact. The very fact that this news could head the CCTV evening news in the country, ahead of many other, you know, people may argue more important subjects, really shows how important it is. It's slightly scary, in a way, to see football elevated to those levels, but as someone who supports the game, again, we have to grab this opportunity that the President's given us to take control back of the beautiful game.
Yeah, what he's done is take football off the back pages and put them on the front pages for the first time in living memory, really. And, you know, a lot of people want to see it succeed. We all, as I said, we hope that it can, but don't underestimate the pressure that this is going to put on the players on the pitch, but also the administrators behind the scenes to succeed because of that greater spotlight. It's a good thing, it's an opportunity, but there is a lot of pressure not to fail.
Now, one of the goals within the reforms is to host the World Cup. Is that realistic, and if so, when could that happen? Mark?
Well, I think eventually the World Cup will come to China, but under the current rules that FIFA have, it doesn't look like they're going to be able to bid until at least 2034. That's 20 years from now, so it's not going to happen. People want results overnight, but that won't happen. So 20 years from now, that's probably okay. It gives China enough time to get a team that's not going to embarrass themselves, and as everyone keeps mentioning, the one time that they have been in the World Cup, they didn't even score a goal. So that is something that is still a sense of shame for the Chinese people.
Rowan?
Yes, I think, you know, the World Cup has to come. I, in fact, think that a China World Cup would benefit from FIFA deciding it many, many years ahead. And then China will start with kids of the age that would be able to participate in that World Cup. So a World Cup that's 8 years ahead means they will focus on 14-year-old kids. It's not going to work. A World Cup throughout to 2034, but agreed much earlier, then you would see China actually implementing a system from birth. And that's what we really need. So the longer the lead time to that World Cup, the better.
One of the other things people are wondering is why is it such a heavy focus on football as opposed to any other sport, basketball or table tennis or whatever?
It's the best sport in the world. That would be my answer. But you know, certainly, I think, you know, the questions have always been asked of Olympics versus the World Cup. The dream, I think, of most Chinese sports fans is to win the World Cup because that remains an impossible dream. The Olympics is much more achievable. So I think in world sport, football is the main leading sport, and China has to perform well and achieve in that sport in front of the world.
Wow. Yeah, it's the passion of the people, it's the passion of the president, but it's a populist move that touches on the government's wider anti-corruption campaign. The sport here in China is still trying to drag itself out of that match-fixing scandal and the corruption elements that go along with that. Some people say it's still part of the game, so it kind of fits every way you look at it, really.
Well, that's actually where I was going to go next. How closely tied is this to this anti-corruption campaign? Do they go hand in hand, or is there more involved in this?
It's hard to say, and again, we'll have to wait to see how it's implemented. One of the problems, potentially, that happens with this, as more money is put towards the sport, then you have more opportunity for corruption in perhaps different areas than in the past. So it's just moving one corruption from one area to another. Of course, everyone wants to avoid that, but it is a potential pitfall.
I think, you know, football is a microcosm of wider society, and I think what we see inside these plans are actually a message to wider society in China. It's a move. The President has started with football. It's a very, very good place to start. It's a very easy target in China because of the corruption in recent years. But yet it does point towards a more accountable society. And I think the resonance of these football plans are actually much wider for Chinese society.
Thank you very much. That was Mark Dreyer, the founder of China Sports Insider, and Rowan Simons, the chairman of China Club Football. They were discussing all the new reforms with the Chinese Football League.